definitely. The EU does love its its regulation. So yes, the Cybersecurity Resilience Act, I guess, is one of those new bits of legislation that is coming in now, and is affecting, I guess, maybe to start out with just the scope, just so that everybody's on the same page. Of course, the scope is effectively any product that has digital elements. So this could be manufacturers, importers, distributors, and it also includes, importantly, non-EU companies that ship into the EU. Or so if anything arrives in the EU, then it is covered by the CRA, or Cyber Resilience Act, very specifically aimed at products and not at services. So just to distinguish the two, so SaaS applications are typically not covered unless they have some product element. So for example, a SaaS service that has an endpoint client, like an EDR, for example, would be included, but a pure SaaS service like Gmail, for example, typically would not be covered. So yeah, maybe we'll just talk a little bit about kind of like what the CRA is, because these LinkedIn live sessions are meant to be very like informational and explaining, helping companies to understand what are the implications for them. And what is the CRA really like testing? So if you've been in the industry a while, you've definitely worked or seen kind of like audits from other companies, ISO 27001 or NIST cybersecurity framework. And often these frameworks can be kind of a checkbox exercise where you just have to like, hey, yes, we are compliant, and like a whole bunch of work is done, and you get your audit certificate and you post on LinkedIn, and everybody's very happy. And then you have to just wait like 2 years until your next surveillance audit and kind of go through the process again. Whereas the CRA is really trying to switch from this checkbox exercise to this more like operational monitoring. Are you doing the things that you say that you're doing it? Are you doing it in a repeatable way more than anything? And it's very much about this like operational side, rather than this compliance side. And can you prove that you're doing the things that you are saying that you are doing? If I just maybe talk a little bit about kind of like smart tech and what we are seeing at a high level, there's definitely some, let's say, some companies are unclear about who owns that responsibility. Is it the product team? Is it IT? Is it the security teams? And kind of like limited visibility then into third-party components and vendors and dependencies. So vulnerability management is definitely an issue. And then a little bit about the kind of like organizations and where they are most exposed. And absolutely, this is organizations that have changed nothing. So they have worked one way in the past, and let's say they continue to operate this way with these, I'm going to call them legacy products or legacy processes, and they've changed nothing. So I would say that these companies are probably very good to be very impacted by this legislation if they ship digital products and include software components. But yeah, maybe Prakhya, kind of like, what are the biggest gaps that you see between Cyber Resilience Act, what it expects, and kind of what most organizations are doing when it comes to product security?
Absolutely, Robert. I believe where companies actually struggle is keeping the product secure post the product launch. This is, I think, where actually most of the products or the organizations fall apart. And that's exactly where the life cycle security comes into the picture. So this is definitely not a one-day launch day checkbox. The act actually makes it very clear that the protection needs to be there from day one until the entire lifetime of your product. So it's technically like ever since you launch the product until it's deployed. So the reality is that new vulnerabilities also keep emerging throughout the launch. So your customers are definitely counting on you to stay ahead and to keep them protected always. So every vulnerability now that needs to be managed, monitored, and disclosed across the product's lifespan. That also means that the patches and updates have to be delivered timely and need to be very secure. Sure, I know we can fix a security flaw, but if it's taking half a year to roll out, So now we know we really don't have a way of addressing that fix there. So now also what further breaks down in practice is there are consistent patterns as to how these things typically collapse. First being the disconnected teams, so the security teams and the product teams, they're never actually in sync. So I've witnessed situations where the critical security issues are kept in backlogs because simply nobody bridges that gap. All right. And second being the production blind spots, how there's very limited monitoring once the products are launched. Everyone's already looking for what's coming up next, but we're really not focusing on what's already deployed and what's already running. So nobody's actually paying attention to that stuff. And talking about also the software supply chain, which is also a problem. We see the modern apps which have a lot of dependencies. So libraries that are dependent on other libraries, the other library is dependent on the next. So you're operating with zero visibility, 3 levels down always. So now when a critical flaw surfaces in one of those components, now we struggle to answer the clients, does this really affect us? We are really not sure of the answer there. And that's where the real impact starts. And that's where actually the teams start losing the confidence. So because we see the risk visibility that gets fragmented as we go layers deep down. So the security folks, the operations, the compliance teams, all of them work in different worlds. So now when the leadership questions, are we secure? Nobody has a unified answer there. And we often follow the manual approaches, which always hit a wall. So you simply cannot manage vulnerabilities with hundreds of dependencies using one particular spreadsheet. I've seen teams try doing it, and it becomes a full-time job for them. And definitely, automation is something that has to come into the picture here. And when questioned, we always have evidence gaps, and most of the times unclear evidences. So if we are asked, please walk me through the response to this issue, we definitely know the emergency patches that we've put on, but we have to go through several project management tools and scramble through many emails to make sure that we have the proof. So that's where I think the fundamental culture crash comes in. We celebrate shipping first, we glorify the innovation, but we don't actually celebrate the teams that are maintaining these 3 year, 4 year, 5 year old products. So I think CRA is definitely trying to change that mindset. It really wants us to see, it really wants us to see it in a way that we have precise knowledge of what is being deployed, and we are accountable for specific individuals for the ongoing security. We have the names assigned teams who respond when issues actually emerge. And it's really important at this point, especially for CRA, to maintain standardized workflows, establish procedures that activates when vulnerabilities appear. And that breaks down again to our perspective and talking point that if you cannot really articulate how security is being looked at post-launch, we are not actually prepared for CRA.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things to take away from the CRA is that like your responsibility as a company persists after that device is in the customer's hands. So like there have been many examples, of manufacturers producing webcams, for example, and then it having vulnerabilities and being open to the public, and now the liability will still stay with the manufacturer after it has been sold to the customer. So really kind of a mindset shift for companies. As you said, moving away from just this like celebrating success of shipping the product to like maintaining that full life cycle and until it is finally end of life and decommissioned. Kind of interested in how organizations are handling now this change in kind of like responsibilities and ensuring that things don't fall between gaps. You mentioned that like try to use one giant Excel file. So what are some like tricks or some ways that you have seen on the successful side? How are companies moving now and changing their systems and processes to be more proactive?
Okay, so I think I see that organizations have started building with the foundational things, like having clear security ownership across the life cycle, and it's just not, it doesn't just mean having a CISO, it means someone who actually wakes up in the morning thinking about the products that have been shipped 3 years ago and who owns that security. And in most companies, we see, Robert, nobody does. So everyone's focused on what's next. So it's also, I think, it also comes down to how organizations have to document their vulnerability handling processes. Also, along with, we now have to start focusing on ongoing monitoring and and the updates and the mechanisms that have to always come into the place while the product's being launched all throughout its life cycle. So it needs continuous visibility into production. So that's also when I want to talk about how smart tech sees, what's actually missing with these companies as well. The first major uh, gap is the confidence in evidence during the audits. Also, the continuous risk visibility post the product launch, and how we actually need to bridge the gap between the teams. The first major gap, I should say, that the joined up security and product workflows, these really have to be in place while we are actually working towards the CRA compliance.
And so, like, if we just take a scenario where like a critical vulnerability has been discovered in a third-party component, so it's not, let's say, the manufacturer's direct fault or the that company's direct fault, but it is an issue in a bit of software, perhaps potentially open source software.
We were talking about the scenarios and how we
Yes.
need to handle the when there's a critical vulnerability or
Yeah.
comes up in a third party component. So I think there are a few things that need to happen first. One is being able to identify which of the products actually use this component. So not just direct dependencies, but there are layers deep down as well. So how can we answer this in the minute and in the days to come? And what's the actual risk, and to assess how we can further go ahead with implementing that call, and then definitely fixing, developing, and testing a patch. But the real challenge is you just can't fix it. You actually need to verify if this doesn't break anything else as well. So again, communication is the key. Customers needs to know which customers are affected, how are we going to notify them. So under the CRA, one thing I really want to mention here is we are looking at 24 hours to notify our authorities for actively exploited vulnerabilities, and again 14 days at the maximum to remediate any critical issues, especially for the European users.
Yes, I guess this will be quite a shock to many companies that are potentially used to multi-month, as you mentioned earlier, like often it could be 6 months and sometimes even longer and sometimes even never patching their vulnerabilities. And as you say, like the first solution is really to have that insight and knowing that that there is a problem. And of course, to have that visibility, you really need to have your processes in place. You have to like not wait till there's an emergency to like discover all of the issues and problems, and that you really like are proactive. Um, and I guess like maybe this is not a sales session, definitely not. But I guess one of the ways that like your team, especially Prakhya, helps companies understand what it means specifically for them, and how that they can like the processes that the ways of working that they need to change inside their own organization to be able to meet these quite tight deadlines. That is not a lot of time to be able to like should we say both understand the risk, assess it, and come up with a competent, capable response plan to that specific issue. But maybe we could keep talking for ages, but we're almost out of time. And maybe just one final kind of like wrap up about like the gaps and that are there, and maybe just from my point of view, kind of thinking about the senior leadership side of stuff. Um, again, very much kind of what you're saying, Prakhya, of like getting companies to think about vulnerability in this bigger picture of not just the hot new thing that they're working on. I mean, like AI at the moment, every company is pushing what new thing can we, how can we embed AI? But there's still this massive responsibility to all of the products that they have already shipped, and not just the new AI powered things that they're adding. So one of the key things I would say for like senior leaders is to think like product security is a board level issue, and you need to be aware of this. You need to be able to answer these questions because this will come up from your board members. Okay, hey, can you explain what we're doing with CRA? And you need to have that answer of, okay, this is how we're tackling it. These are the processes that we are now implementing. Because if nothing has changed in your company, if you're still using the legacy processes and tools and approaches that you did 5 years ago, definitely something is going wrong if you're shipping products or digital elements. And of course, the big thing is like regulators will expect traceability and proof. And so this is not something that you're just going to be able to pull out of the hat at the last moment. You need to be able to, there needs to be a process there, and it needs to be well tested, well deployed, well embedded into the ways of working of that organization. To be able to satisfy that traceability and like the proof of implementation of controls. But then maybe, Prakhya, from like a kind of more practical point of view, what are your key takeaways, that your key advice for companies?
I think I'll just put that to limited to 3 points as to how we can, work towards the CRA compliance. First is, we need to map every product to a specific owner. I think that definitely has to be the top one priority when we start. I say we should already start working towards it. So the second thing being the visibility really has to be centralized, and we need to stop having security data scattered over 5 different tools that don't talk to each other, and the process that really have to be standardized. And you don't need a different vulnerability response process for every product, I'd say, but one playbook that scales around most of them. So that's how you scale security across multiple products without drowning teams into complexity, Robert.
Absolutely. We could definitely keep talking about this, and I
Yeah.
hope we now, just to wrap up, I guess we will continue the conversation at CDC. For those who don't know, Zero Day Con is taking place on the 29th of April in the Royal Dublin Convention Centre. Definitely the CRA, as well as the EU AI Act, a bunch of the other regulations. We'll be having sessions on these during Zero Day Con. So I hope you can join us at Zero Day Con. And we'll to continue the conversation there in kind of a relaxed, more relaxed, kind of practical environment. And with that, just want to say thank you again, Prakhya, very much for your time today. As always, very insightful to have a conversation with you. Very much enjoyed the time, and thanks everyone, and see you all at Zero Day Con.